A $20 tip, or a $50? For Elena Sanchez, balancing 3 tables in the middle of the dinner rush, that was the only mystery that mattered. Until they walked in. Julian Thorne, a tech billionaire who bought and sold skylines, entered with his fiancée, a woman who dripped diamonds, and a third woman who looked like a beautiful ghost, his mother, Isabella. Elena, a waitress 1 paycheck away from disaster, was just trying to get their order. But when she saw the older woman's hidden, desperate gestures, Eleanor did something no one else dared to. She spoke back in a silent language, and the one sign she got in return would unravel a 10-year conspiracy of murder, greed, and a secret that started with a simple butterfly. The L'Etoile d'Or was a restaurant that didn't just serve food, it sold silence. It sold the privilege of being insulated from the world by 3 feet of plush carpet, heavy velvet curtains, and waiters who moved like shadows. Elena Sanchez was one of those shadows. At 24, Elena was a veteran of the service industry, which was a polite way of saying she was exhausted. She lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up, in a neighborhood the restaurant's patrons only saw from the windows of their town cars. Her life was a ledger of expenses: rent, late, utilities, due, and the relentless, gnawing cost of her mother's care facility. Every night, she zipped up her cheap polyester uniform, pinned on her plastic name tag, and became invisible. "Sanchez, you're on the patio," hissed the manager, not looking up. "I thought I was on station 5. "You're where I put you, and tuck that shirt in. Mr. Van Doren is here. Don't embarrass me." Elena smoothed her shirt, her fingers brushing the faint, star-shaped scar on her wrist. "Don't be tired. Don't be poor. Don't be real. The patio was the worst. It was where the real money sat. Elena preferred the bar, with its quick, transactional diners. The patio was for 3-hour experiences, for people who dissected the menu like a legal brief and complained about the terroir of the sparkling water. And tonight, the patio was dominated by Table 4, the Thorne party. Elena had heard the whispers in the kitchen. "Julian Thorne is here. The Reaper of Silicon Valley. I hear he's worth $50 billion. Elena grabbed 3 leather-bound menus. She didn't care if he was worth $50 billion or 50 cents. She just hoped he wasn't a camper, someone who sat for hours and tipped 10%. She approached the table, her smile pasted on. "Good evening, and welcome to L'Etoile d'Or." Julian Thorne didn't look up from his phone. He was sharp, angular, and dressed in a black suit so expensive it seemed to absorb the light around him. He radiated a cold, crackling energy. Beside him, a woman who could have been sculpted from porcelain and venom smiled a tight, red-lipped smile. This was Chloe Van Doren, daughter of the industrialist at the next table. Her engagement ring was a block of ice that caught the candlelight and threw rainbows of pure contempt. "We'll have the 98 Petrus," Chloe said, not asking. It was a $7,000 bottle. "And bring a bread basket, not the assorted, just the brioche, and make sure it's warm." "Of course, Mum," Elena said. Then she saw the third woman. She was seated opposite Julian, almost obscured by a large potted fern. She was older, perhaps in her late 50s, with a fragile, aristocratic beauty. Her greying hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, but strands had escaped, framing a face that was utterly, heart-breakingly sad. She wore a simple grey dress, a stark contrast to Chloe's glittering sheath. This was Isabella Thorne, the family matriarch, a recluse seldom seen in public. She was staring at her hands, which were clenched in her lap. "And for your mother?" Elena asked, directing her gaze to Julian. Julian waved a dismissive hand, his eyes still on his screen. "She'll have the sea base. No salt, steamed vegetables, no sauce." Julian, darling, Chloe purred, placing her hand on his. Don't be so dull. It's a celebration. She turned her high-wattage smile on Isabella. Won't you have the lobster, Isabella? It's divine. Isabella Thorne didn't react. She didn't even look up. She can't hear you, Chloe. You know that, Julian said, his voice flat with annoyance. He tapped the side of his head. The aides are on the fritz, again. Elena's eyes flickered to the woman's ears. She saw them. 2 small, flesh-colored devices, expensive and top of the line. But they looked inert. Switched off. I'll be right back with the wine list, Elena said, her voice steady. As she turned, she saw it. A tiny, aborted movement. Isabella Thorne's right hand, hidden below the table, had unfolded. Her fingers had twitched. It wasn't a spasm, it was a word. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She knew that movement. It was the sign for cold. She stumbled on the way back to the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was nothing. A coincidence. The woman was cold. Her hand twitched. But Eleanor's mind wasn't on the wine. It was on a small, quiet boy. 10 years gone. It was on her little brother, Leo. Leo, who had been deaf from birth. Leo, who had taught her to sign before she could read. Leo, whose hands had been his voice, his life, until they were silenced forever. Elena shook her head, forcing the memory down. Leo was gone. This job was all she had. She couldn't afford to see ghosts. She returned with the wine, presented the bottle, and endured Chloe's lecture on the proper way to decant it. All the while she watched Table 4. Julian and Chloe were in their own bubble, laughing, plotting, merging their empires with every glance. Isabella was an island. She hadn't moved. She hadn't touched her water. She was a prop in her son's life. Elena served the appetizers. Chloe sent the truffle soup back. It's tepid. Elena brought a new one. As she set the new bowl down, her hand brushed a small, silver clutch by Isabella's plate. "Watch it," Chloe snapped. "That's couture, you clod." "My apologies, Mum," Elena murmured, her face burning. "Honestly, Julian," Chloe sighed. "The service here has gone to the dogs. Why do we even come here?" "It's quiet," Julian said, finally looking up. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept over Elena, dismissing her entirely. And that's when Elena looked at Isabella. The older woman's eyes were fixed on Elena, and they were filled with a profound, terrifying shame. She was mortified, not for herself, but for Elena. Elena's training screamed at her. "Avert your gaze, apologize, disappear." But the part of her that was Leo's sister, the part of her that hadn't died with him, took over. As she turned, she did it. A split-second decision that would change everything. Her left hand, shielded by the tray she held, moved against her black apron. It was low, fast, and hidden from Julian and Chloe. Just 3 simple movements. R. You. Okay? The reaction was instantaneous. Isabella Thorne's back went rigid, her head snapped up, her eyes locking with Eleanor's. A gasp, tiny and sharp, escaped her lips. Julian looked up, annoyed. "What is it now, Mother?" Isabella's face was a mask of panic. She shook her head, fumbling for her water glass, her eyes wide with a terror that went far beyond a rude waitress. "What did you do?" Julian's voice was low, cutting. He wasn't looking at his mother. He was looking at Eleanor. "Sir," Eleanor's heart was a drum. "You did something. You upset her. I just asked if she needed more water, sir." Verbally. Chloe scoffed. "She's deaf, you idiot. She couldn't have heard you." "My apologies," Elena said, backing away. I'll check on your entrees." She fled. She hid in the dry storage room, her back pressed against bags of flour, trying to breathe. What had she done? She'd broken the cardinal rule. She had seen the guest. She had to get through the rest of the night. She served their main courses. She cleared their plates. She didn't make eye contact. Isabella sat like a statue, her food untouched. Finally, it was over. Julian signed the check, adding a tip so insultingly large it felt like a punishment. They stood to leave. Julian put a proprietary hand on Chloe's back. A private security guard, who had been sitting at the bar, materialized and moved to Isabella's side, gently taking her arm. Isabella walked like a sleepwalker, her eyes on the floor. As they passed Eleanor, who was standing by the service station, Isabella paused. It was just for a second. The guard tugged her arm. Julian and Chloe were already at the door. Isabella looked back. Her eyes met Elena's. Then her right hand, half hidden by the sleeve of her coat, moved. It was just for a moment, a flutter of fingers against her palm. But Elena saw it. It wasn't a word. It wasn't help, or yes, or no. It was a sign, a picture, a small fluttering motion with her thumb crossed over her index and middle fingers. A butterfly. Elena's blood didn't just run cold, it froze. She dropped the heavy silver tray she was holding. It hit the marble floor with a catastrophic crash that echoed through the entire restaurant. Every head turned. Julian Thorne looked back, his face a mask of fury. Elena didn't see him. She didn't see anything but that sign. Because it wasn't a random gesture. It wasn't from any standard sign language textbook. It was a private sign. A home sign. It was the sign she and Leo had invented when they were children. It was their most secret word. The sign for Leo. The silence after the crash was louder than the noise. Every diner, every waiter, even the chefs who peeked through the kitchen door, was frozen, staring at Eleanor. She stood amidst a wreckage of shattered glass water goblets and silver cutlery. Julian Thorne's face was thunderous. "Are you insane?" He spat, his voice dangerously low. I'm sorry. It slipped," Elena stammered, dropping to her knees, her hands automatically starting to pick up the shards. A piece of glass bit into her palm, and she hissed, drawing blood. "Get out," the manager, Mr. Henderson, hissed, materializing at her side. He was pale with rage. "Go to my office, now." "Julian, let's go," Chloe urged, pulling his arm. "She's just a clumsy cow. She's not worth it." Julian gave Eleanor one last look, a look of such profound contempt it felt like a physical blow. Then he turned and swept Chloe and his mother out of the restaurant. Elena, trembling, gathered the broken pieces and fled to the back. She was fired before she even had a chance to clean the blood off her hand. "You're a liability, Sanchez," Henderson said, not meeting her eyes as he slid her final, meager paycheck across his desk. "You disturbed the Thorne party. Do you have any idea who that was?" Elena said nothing. She couldn't speak. Her mind was not in the office. It was back on the patio, watching Isabella Thorne's hand flutter. The butterfly. "Leo, get your things. Leave." She walked out of the L'Etoile door into the cold November night, the sounds of the city a muffled roar. The world had tilted. She had lost her job, her only lifeline. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was that a ghost had just walked through her life. How? How could Isabella Thorne, a billionaire recluse, know the private sign for her dead brother? She walked the 40 blocks back to her apartment, the cold seeping into her thin uniform. When she got to her tiny fifth-floor room, she didn't turn on the light. She went to a battered wooden chest at the foot of her bed. Inside, beneath her nursing home brochures and her spare set of sheets, was a shoe box. She opened it. The smell of dust and memory hit her. Inside were photos. Eleanor and Leo at the beach, their arms slung around each other. Leo at his 16th birthday, grinning, his hands blurred as he signed cake. Their mother, younger, happier, before the grief had hollowed her out. And at the bottom, a newspaper clipping. Tragic accident claims local teen. It was 10 years old. 10 years since Leo had been killed. He was working his first job, a delivery boy for a local pharmacy, saving up for a new video game console. It was 11 p.m. He was riding his bike back, just 3 blocks from home. A car, witnesses said. A black, expensive car. It didn't slow down. It didn't stop. It hit Leo and vanished into the night. The police called it a hit and run. They found a broken piece of a headlight, identified as belonging to a vintage Bentley S2. But in this city, that wasn't much of a clue. The case went cold in less a week. It was just another poor kid in the wrong place. But for Elena's family, it was the end of the world. Her mother had a nervous breakdown, one she never fully recovered from. The medical bills from Leo's time in the ICU, followed by the cost of his funeral, and then their mother's subsequent institutionalization, had bankrupted them. Elena, just 14 at the time, had become the family's sole survivor. Her entire life, her double shifts, her exhaustion, it all traced back to that night. She sank to the floor, the clipping in one hand, the bloody napkin from the restaurant in the other. The butterfly. It wasn't just his name. It was their secret. When they were kids, hiding from their drunk, angry father, they would hide in the closet, and they would sign butterfly to each other in the dark. It meant, I'm here. We're safe. The monster is gone. It was a sign no one else could know. And Isabella Thorne had signed it. A new, cold feeling replaced her grief. Rage. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a message. Elena booted up her ancient, struggling laptop. The internet was slow, the fan whirring like a dying engine. She started to dig. She knew Julian Thorne. Everyone did. The tech prodigy who took his father's legacy company, Thorne Industries, and turned it into a global behemoth. But she didn't know Isabella. The search results were thin. Isabella Thorne, wife of the late Arthur Thorne. Isabella Thorne, noted recluse. Rare appearance from Isabella Thorne. She was a ghost online too. There were pictures from 10-15 years ago. Isabella at galas, launching ships, cutting ribbons. She was beautiful, vibrant, and always wearing a smile. In many photos, she was beside her husband, Arthur Thorne, a man with a predator's grin and cold eyes. Then, 10 years ago, the photos stopped. Elena checked the dates. 10 years ago, exactly. Around the same time, Arthur Thorne died of a sudden heart attack, and almost to the week that Leo was killed. Since then, nothing. Just a few blurry, long-lens paparazzi shots of her being hurried from a car to a private building, always flanked by security, always looking down. The media narrative was simple. A grieving widow, devastated by her husband's death, who had a nervous breakdown and became a recluse. It was rumored she had significant hearing loss from a childhood illness that had worsened, and she refused to engage with the world. A convenient story, Elena muttered. She kept digging. She went into the archives of the New York Register, searching for any mention of the Thornes 10 years ago. She found it. Not on the front page, but in the society section. A grainy photo from the annual Metropolitan Arts Gala. The date was 3 days after Leo was killed. The caption read, Julian Thorne making his first public appearance as CEO with his fiancée, Chloe Van Doren, and his mother, Isabella Thorne. Elena's breath hitched. She zoomed in. Julian, younger, but with the same cold eyes. Chloe triumphant, already wearing the ring. And Isabella. She was a spectre. Her face was pale, her eyes vacant. She was wearing a black dress. But it wasn't the dress that made Eleanor's blood freeze. It was the jewelry. Pinned to the shoulder of her dress was a massive, glittering diamond brooch. It was shaped like a butterfly. Elena didn't sleep. She couldn't. The image of the butterfly brooch was burned into her mind. A coincidence? A rich woman's expensive jewelry? No. Not after that sign. She called the care facility. "Hi, this is Elena Sanchez. For my mother." She couldn't bring herself to use her mother's name. "I'm sorry. I'm going to be a day late with the payment. I lost my job." The voice on the other end was cold, rehearsed. "Miss Sanchez, we have a policy. Payment is due on the 1st. If you are more than 48 hours late, we will have to begin discharge proceedings." "Discharge? You can't. She has nowhere to go." "That is not our concern. We have a waiting list." The line clicked. Elena stared at the phone. The desperation was a physical weight, pressing the air from her lungs. She had 48 hours. 48 hours to get a new job, get a new paycheck, or her mother would be on the street. The old Elena would have been on Craigslist, looking for waitressing jobs. The old Elena would have been begging Mr. Henderson for a second chance, but the old Eleanor hadn't seen a ghost. The butterfly, the brooch, the accident. She had to know. She shoved her laptop into her worn backpack, threw on a hoodie, and left. She didn't go to the library. She went to the one person in the city who might understand, who wouldn't call her crazy. Marco was the head pastry chef at L'Etoile d'Or. He was a man of quiet intensity, with flour in his hair and ink-stained arms. He and Elena had bonded in the alleyway on 3 a.m. breaks, sharing cigarettes and complaints. She found him in the pre-dawn light, unloading bags of flour from a truck. "Elena, what are you doing here? Henderson will have your head." "He already did. I was fired." Marco stopped, a 50-pound bag on his shoulder. He swore, a long string of Italian curses. "Because of Thorne. I heard the crash. I'm sorry, Cara." "Marco, I need your help." She told him everything. In the cold, garbage-scented alley, she laid it all out. The dinner, the rude fiancé, the silent mother. And then, the signs. "She signed to me, Marco. Are you okay?" And I was stupid. I asked her the same. And when she left, Elena's voice broke. She signed Leo. She signed my brother's name. Marco set the bag down. His jovial face was suddenly serious. "Leo, your brother who was killed 10 years ago, hit and run. The same week Isabella Thorne became a recluse." Marco crossed himself. "Elena, this is dark water." "I know, but I also saw this." She pulled up the image of the gala on her cracked phone screen. The butterfly brooch, 3 days after he died. Marco stared at the image. "So? Rich people like butterflies." "No, you don't understand. The sign she made. It was that brooch, the exact shape, the same tilted wings. It wasn't just butterfly. It was that butterfly." Now he was listening. "What do you want from me, Elena?" "I need to get to her. I need to talk to her." "She's a prisoner, Cara. You saw the guard. That family is a fortress." "I know. But I lost my job. My mum is about to be homeless. I have nothing left to lose. They took my brother's life, and now they've taken my job. I'm not running, not this time." Marco looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. He saw the grief, the rage, and the steel underneath. "Okay," he said. "Okay. I can't get you into their penthouse. But the rich, they are creatures of habit. They have routines. Let me ask around. The delivery network, the kitchen staff around the city. We talk. We know things." Thank you, Marco. Go home, Elena. Get some sleep. You look like a ghost. She couldn't sleep. She went back to her room and dug deeper. If Isabella was a prisoner, who was the jailer? Julian Thorne. Everything about him was sterile. Corporate profiles, Forbes articles about his ruthless efficiency, pictures of him at product launches. But his personal life was a black hole. And then there was Chloe Van Doren. Eleanor searched for Thorne and Van Doren. The results were immediate. Thorne Industries and Van Doren Global announce merger. The articles were full of business speak, synergy, market consolidation. But Eleanor read between the lines. Julian Thorne was marrying Chloe Van Doren to merge their two multi-billion-dollar companies. It was a deal, not a romance. She found an old, bitter-sounding interview with a former Thorne Industries executive. Arthur Thorne didn't build that company, the man claimed. He stole it, the entire Thorne quantum patent. It was his partner's, Robert Van Doren. Arthur cut him out, bankrupted him, and left him with nothing. Julian is just finishing what his father started, only this time he's doing it with a wedding ring. Chloe Van Doren wasn't just Julian's fiancée. She was the daughter of the man his father had destroyed. This merger was Julian absorbing the last piece of his father's conquest. And what about Isabella? A new search. Isabella Thorne, Pulse Art, a single promising result. Mrs. Isabella Thorne remains the primary patron of the Newbold Gallery, a position she has held for 15 years. Though she no longer attends openings, she is said to enjoy private, after-hours viewings. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Marco. Newbold Gallery, Thursday, 10 a.m. She goes every week, like clockwork, for the deaf children's art therapy program she funds. Be careful, Elena. They say her companion is ex-Mossad. It was Thursday, 9 a.m. Elena looked at her eviction notice. She looked at her brother's picture. She had 1 hour. The Newbold Gallery was a stark, white cube of glass and steel in the most expensive part of downtown. It was the kind of place that had more security guards than paintings. Elena looked the part of a struggling art student, all in black, with her backpack and a haunted expression. She paid the $25 admission fee, a cost that made her stomach clench, and walked inside. The main hall was cavernous and empty, save for a massive, incomprehensible sculpture made of twisted metal. A few patrons drifted silently, speaking in whispers. Elena's heart was a trip hammer. She was looking for a ghost. She found her on the second floor, in a small, brightly lit room. The sign on the door read, "The Butterfly Wing, Art by the Children of the St. Jude Academy." Isabella Thorne was standing in front of a small, colourful painting of a sunflower. She wasn't alone. A tall, broad-shouldered woman with a severe haircut and a visible earpiece stood by the door. This was the companion Marco had warned her about. She was watching Isabella with the bored, alert patience of a professional handler. Isabella looked even smaller and more fragile in the daylight. She was wearing a beige cashmere suit, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked safe, coddled, trapped. Elena's first instinct was to run. What was she doing? Accusing a sick old woman of what? Knowing a sign? But then Isabella turned. Her eyes scanned the room, vacant until they landed on Eleanor. There was no flicker of recognition, just a polite, empty gaze. Eleanor's courage faltered. Had she imagined it all? Was she so desperate for a villain that she'd invented one? The handler, the companion, stepped forward. "Ma'am, can I help you? This wing is reserved." I'm sorry," Elena stammered. "I was just looking." It's for the St. Jude Academy?" The handler's eyes narrowed. That's correct. My brother went there. Elena lied, her mind racing. A long time ago. Leo Sanchez. At the name Leo, Isabella's head twitched. Her gaze snapped to Elena. This time it wasn't empty. It was sharp. Please leave, the handler said, her voice dropping an octave. I just wanted to see, Elena said, her voice rising, desperate. She looked past the guard, directly at Isabella. He loved it there. He loved to draw. He loved butterflies. Isabella took a sharp, audible breath. The handler grabbed Elena's arm. You need to leave, now. Her grip was steel. No! Elena pulled away, taking 2 steps into the room. She was burning her last bridge. She didn't care. She looked at Isabella. She raised her hands. She didn't sign. Who are you? She didn't sign. What did you do? She signed. Why are you in prison? The handler saw the gesture. Security! She barked into her wrist mic, but it was too late. Isabella Thorne's face crumpled. It was as if a mask, held in place for 10 years, had shattered. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her whole body began to shake. She raised her hands, her movements frantic, desperate. The handler lunged, grabbing Isabella's wrists. Mrs. Thorne, stop! You're agitated. It's time for your medication. Get off her! Elena shouted. 2 gallery security guards burst into the room, grabbing Elena. Get her out of here, the handler commanded, her voice like ice. They were dragging Elena backward, her feet skidding on the polished floor. Isabella! Elena screamed. Isabella was fighting, twisting in the handler's grip, her face a mask of terror and something else. Resolve. As they dragged Elena through the doorway, Isabella broke one hand free. She signed one last, desperate word. Not help, not sorry. She signed Fincher. Then she signed it again. Fincher. The doors slammed shut. Elena was hauled through the lobby and thrown onto the pavement outside. You're banned from this property, the guard spat. And the police have been called. Elena didn't wait. She ran. She ran until her lungs burned, until she was blocks away, until she collapsed onto a bench in a small city park. She was shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. Fincher. It was a name, a clue. She had her phone, but her hands were trembling so badly she could barely type. Thorne Industries plus Fincher. The results were instantaneous. David Fincher, former Thorne CFO, fired amidst embezzlement scandal. The articles were all 10 years old, just before Arthur Thorne's death. David Fincher, the numbers guy, the architect of the Thorne empire, had been summarily fired, accused of redirecting millions. He had been publicly disgraced. He'd countersued, claiming he was a whistleblower, that Arthur Thorne was a monster and a thief, but the case was thrown out. Fincher vanished. He was the man who had tried to stop Arthur Thorne, and Isabella had just given Eleanor his name. The second shock hit her. When Eleanor had signed, "Why are you in prison?" Isabella's face had changed, but she hadn't signed. "I'm not." She hadn't been confused. She had looked guilty. Eleanor's phone buzzed again. 24 hours. The eviction warning. She had a name. She had a deadline. She had to find a man who had been erased by the Thorne family. Finding David Fincher was like trying to find a specific grain of sand. After his disgrace, he'd fallen off the face of the earth. There were no social media profiles, no new business listings. He was a digital ghost. Elena was running out of time. The 48-hour clock from the nursing home was a ticking bomb. She was back in her tiny apartment, the eviction notice on the table, the laptop humming. She tried everything. Old addresses, property records, even searching for his family members. Nothing. The Thorne family hadn't just fired him. They had deleted him. "Think, Elena, think," she muttered, pacing her small room. How do you find someone who doesn't want to be found? You look for his enemies. She reversed her search. Instead of David Fincher, she searched for Arthur Thorne plus whistleblower and Thorne Industries plus fraud. Most links were dead, leading to 404 not found errors, the digital gravestones of Thorne's legal team. But on page 14 of a search, she found a blog. A crusty, ancient-looking finance blog from 2015. The post was a rant, titled, "The Thorne-Fincher Case Was a Sham." The author, Finwatcher88, detailed the case with obsessive clarity, pointing out holes in the embezzlement story. Thorne claimed Fincher stole $10 million, the post read. But the real crime was the Viridian patent, the technology that Thorne Industries is built on. Fincher had the receipts. He was going to prove Arthur Thorne stole it from name redacted by legal threat. Elena's heart leaped. Robert Van Doren. At the bottom of the post was a single comment from a user named DF Truth, dated 2 years ago. "They didn't just take my job. They took my life. They are watching. But the truth is still in the numbers. They always forget the numbers." The comment was linked to a defunct user profile. But it was him. Elena's mind was racing. They are watching. He was paranoid. The truth is in the numbers. He was an accountant. Where would a disgraced, paranoid accountant hide? Not in a fancy apartment, not in a new city. He would hide in plain sight, in a place with no digital footprint, a place where they wouldn't think to look. She searched cash-only apartments, off-grid living, and finally, single-room occupancy hotels. She cross-referenced the SRO hotels with the last known address from Fincher's 10-year-old lawsuit. One name popped up, the St. Regis Arms. It was a flophouse in the industrial district, a place that smelled of stale beer and despair. Elena grabbed the $40 she had hidden in her freezer, her emergency food money. She took a bus. The St. Regis Arms was a crumbling brick building. The man at the front desk had a face like a collapsed boxing glove. "Looking for someone?" he grunted, not looking up from his tabloid. I'm looking for my uncle," Elena said, her voice shaking. David F. "No one here by that name." "He's an older guy," Elena pressed, sliding $20 of her precious $40 onto the counter. "Likes numbers. Quiet." The man's eyes flickered to the $20. He looked at her. "You a cop?" "No, I'm a relative. He's sick." The man sighed. He pocketed the $20. "Room 413. Mr. Smith. Don't knock. He hates knocking. And don't stay long. He gets agitated." Room 413 was at the end of a dark, flickering hallway. The door was scarred and thin. Elena's hand was raised to knock, but she remembered the clerk's words. She slid a piece of paper under the door. On it, she had written one word. Isabella. She waited. 1 minute. 2. The door creaked open, just a few inches, held by a chain. A single, bloodshot eye peered out. "Who are you? Who sent you?" The voice was a dry rasp. "My name is Elena Sanchez," she said, her voice low. "Isabella Thorne. She gave me your name." The chain rattled. The door opened. David Fincher was a wreck. He was thin to the point of emaciation, with a long, grey beard and a wild, haunted look in his eyes. The room was a mess of piled newspapers, stacked ledgers and string. There was a complex web of string tied to the doorknob, leading to a series of small bells. "You're lying," he hissed. "She's a prisoner. She doesn't talk to anyone." "She doesn't have to," Elena said. "She signs." Fincher's eyes widened. "She signed your name," Elena continued. "She's in trouble, and I think she knows something about my brother." "Your brother?" "Leo Sanchez. He was killed 10 years ago. A hit and run. A black Bentley." David Fincher stumbled back, as if she had struck him. He collapsed onto a small cot. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God." The boy. "What boy?" Elena's voice was sharp. "What do you know?" I was supposed to be the one," Fincher whispered, rocking back and forth. "It was supposed to be me." "What are you talking about?" Fincher stood up, his eyes suddenly clear and blazing with a terrifying intensity. "Arthur Thorne," he said. "He was a monster. I was his CFO. I cooked the books. I helped him hide the theft of the Viridian patent from Robert Van Doren. I was good at my job. But I had a conscience. It was small, but it was there." He pointed to a wall, which was covered in a massive hand-drawn flowchart. "I found the other accounts," he said. "The offshore funds. It wasn't just white-collar crime. It was dark, bribes, blackmail, problem-solving. He was laundering money for very bad people. I had to get out. But I couldn't just leave. I had to expose him." "So you leaked the story," Elena said, remembering the articles. "I tried," Fincher cried. "I gathered the documents, the real ledgers. I contacted a journalist, a real one, someone brave. We were going to meet, secretly, at an all-night diner, 10 years ago. November 12th. Elena grabbed his arm. That's the night Leo died." "Arthur found out." Fincher's voice was barely a whisper. He knew I was meeting someone. He sent his cleaners. They weren't supposed to. They were just supposed to scare me, to get the documents. But you weren't there," Elena said. "They got the time wrong," Fincher said, tears streaming down his face. "I was late. My car broke down. I was late. But he wasn't." "Who?" "The boy, the delivery kid. He was just there, on his bike. He must have seen the car, seen them. The black Bentley, Arthur's cleaners." Fincher's face crumpled. "They thought he was my contact. They thought this kid on a bicycle was my journalist. So they silenced him." Elena felt the floor drop out from under her. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a hit and run. It was murder. "And they took his bag," Fincher sobbed. "They thought he was carrying the documents. They brought the bag to Arthur. But it was just sandwiches or whatever the poor kid was delivering." "And Isabella?" Elena's voice was ice. "Where was she?" Fincher looked at her, his eyes hollow. "Arthur was a sadist. He liked an audience. He made her watch. She was in the car. She was in the Bentley." Elena's world dissolved. The small, stinking room, the madman with his charts, the hum of the city. It all faded into a white-hot pinpoint of rage. She was in the car. Isabella Thorne, the sad, ghost-like woman. She wasn't a victim. She was a witness. "She watched," Elena said, her voice a dead, flat monotone. "She watched them kill my brother, and she did nothing." "She was terrified," Fincher argued, sensing the shift in her. "Arthur was a monster. He would have killed her, too. He broke her. That night broke her." "It killed my brother," Elena shot back. "It broke my mother. It ruined my life. Don't talk to me about broken." She began to pace, the fury a living thing inside her. "So what happened? They kill Leo. They realize he's not you. And what?" "They came for me," Fincher said. "The next day. But I was already gone. I knew. The moment I heard about the accident on the news, the hit and run, I knew. I ran. I grabbed what I could, my backup ledgers, and I disappeared. Arthur couldn't find me, so he did the next best thing. He destroyed me. He planted the embezzlement evidence. He paid off the judges. He erased me. And Arthur? He got sloppy, Fincher said with a bitter laugh. He was celebrating. He had the documents, or so he thought. He had his wife terrified into silence, and he had his rival, Van Doren, on the ropes. He was invincible. And then, 2 weeks later, he had a heart attack on his private jet. "Julian," Elena breathed. "Julian is his father's son," Fincher said, "but smarter, colder. He inherited the company and the secret. He knows. He knows his father was a murderer, and he's been using it to control everyone." The pieces slammed into place. Julian was controlling his mother, not with violence, but with the memory, with shame. "You stay quiet, Mother, or I'll tell the world what you really are, what you saw." He was controlling Chloe. "Marry me, or I'll leak the rest of the proof of what my father did to yours, and the scandal will ruin us both." And Isabella, poor silent Isabella, her deafness, Elena said. "Is it real?" "It's real," Fincher confirmed. "She had an illness as a child. It got worse over time. But the silence, that was her choice. After that night, she just stopped speaking. First to Arthur, then to Julian, then to everyone. The sign language. That was her one rebellion, her one way of speaking in a language her jailers couldn't understand. "Until me," Elena said. "Until you," Fincher agreed. "You were a variable Julian couldn't control, a waitress who spoke the language of ghosts. The butterfly." "The gala," Elena said. "The brooch, 3 days after. She wore a butterfly. It was her penance," Fincher said, his voice soft. Her confession. She couldn't speak, she couldn't write, so she wore it. A symbol. She was screaming for help, in the only way she knew how." Elena sank onto a pile of newspapers. It was too much. It was a conspiracy too vast, a pain too deep. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice small. "We? There is no we, Miss Sanchez. You run. You take this information, and you run as fast as you can. Julian Thorne has a reach you cannot imagine. He will find you. He will crush you. He already had you fired." "What's next?" "He's not the only one," Elena said, a cold, hard resolve setting in. "The 24-hour notice. Her mother. Leo." "What do you mean?" "He's merging with Van Doren Global. The deal is being announced at the Thorne Foundation Gala. Tomorrow night. So, it's a done deal." "No," Elena said, standing up. "It's a party, and everyone will be there. Julian, Chloe, Isabella." She looked at Fincher. "And you." "Me?" Fincher squeaked, backing away. No. I'm a dead man. I'm a ghost. I'm not going there." "You told me you had the real ledgers," Elena said. "The backup, the proof of what Arthur did, the proof of the original fraud." I do," Fincher whispered. He pointed to a rusted, fireproof safe under his cot. "But they're useless. The statute of limitations. This isn't about the statute of limitations," Elena said, her voice ringing with authority. "This is about murder. We can't prove Julian killed Leo. But we can prove that the entire Thorne Empire is built on a lie. We can prove that the man Julian calls a visionary was a common thief. We can't get justice for Leo. But we can get revenge." "Revenge?" "No," Elena corrected herself, her brother's face flashing in her mind. "Not revenge. Truth. We expose the root, and the whole tree dies." Fincher stared at her. The paranoid, broken man was gone. In his place was the shadow of the CFO, who had once stood up to Arthur Thorne. "How?" he whispered. "The place will be a fortress." Elena's mind was moving fast. The kitchen, the staff, the back of house. "I know a guy," she said, pulling out her phone. She dialed Marco. "Marco, it's Elena. I need a favor, a big one. I need 2 catering uniforms for tomorrow night." There was a pause. "Elena, Kara, what are you doing? This is Pazzo! They murdered my brother, Marco, Elena said, her voice flat. And they're going to pay. Another pause. Longer this time. The North Service entrance, 7 p.m., Marco said. Be invisible. He hung up. Elena turned to Fincher. It's time, David. Are you going to hide in this room for the rest of your life? Or are you going to get your name back? Fincher looked at his wall of string and charts. He looked at the safe. He took my life, Fincher said, his voice low. He took that boy's life. He bent down and began to work the combination on the safe. Let's go burn them to the ground. The Thorn Foundation Gala was a fortress of glass, steel, and old money. The main hall of the museum, rented for the night, was a sea of black ties and diamonds. Beneath it, in the chaos of the catering kitchen, Elena and David Fincher were just two more shadows in server jackets. This is insane, Fincher whispered, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold a tray. We're invisible, Elena said, her voice hard. Now we work. Marco found them, his face grim. He shoved a small earpiece into Elena's hand. This is patched into the AV system. You'll hear the stage cues. My nephew is in the van outside, with Fincher's laptop. He can override the main projector, but only once. When? When Julian Thorne makes his speech. That's the signal. Now go. You're on canapes. For an hour, they moved through the crowd. Eleanor saw Julian, triumphant on a dais, with Chloe plastered to his side, and she saw Isabella. She was at the main table, a silent prop in silver, wearing the infamous butterfly brooch. Her handler stood 10 feet behind her. I'm going over, Elena whispered. No, Elena, it's too risky. She has to know. Elena moved, her tray a shield. She approached the table. Chloe Van Doren waved her away with contempt. Elena ignored her, her eyes locked on Isabella. Elena moved her tray. Underneath it, her left hand signed, Tonight. Watch the stage. Leo. Isabella's head snapped up. Her eyes, wide with terror, met Elena's. She gave a tiny, frantic shake of her head. No, don't. The handler was already moving. This table is set. Go. Elena vanished back into the crowd. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. And now, a voice boomed. The CEO of Thorn Van Doren, Mr. Julian Thorne. Julian walked onto the stage to a storm of applause. He adjusted the microphone, his smile radiating power. Thank you, he began. Tonight we celebrate a legacy started by my father, Arthur Thorne, a visionary who taught me that, to build a future, you must have strength, you must have vision, and you must. He faltered. The massive screen behind him was no longer showing the company logo. It was showing a scanned document. The original Viridian patent, with Robert Van Doren's name as the sole inventor. A murmur rippled through the hall. A slight, technical glitch, Julian stammered, his smile tightening. The image changed. A bank ledger, an offshore account, a massive transfer of funds, signed by Arthur Thorne. What is this? Julian hissed at the AV booth. The image changed again. A scanned police report. Deceased, Leo Sanchez, age 16, cause, hit and run. A collective gasp. Elena was moving. She was walking, no longer a shadow, straight toward the stage. Julian saw her, his face contorted in pure rage. You! The screen changed one last time. It was a grainy, black and white security cam photo. A black Bentley, a boy on a bike, and a woman in the passenger seat, her face illuminated, mouth open in a silent scream. Isabella. Turn it off, Julian shrieked. Security, get her. 2 guards grabbed Elena, but she didn't care. The truth was out. Chloe Van Doren was staring at the screen, her face ashen. He stole it, she whispered. Julian leaped off the stage, shoving past the guards, and grabbed Eleanor. His fingers dug into her arms. "You're nothing," he spat. "You're a bug. I will crush you. I will destroy you and your family. Stop!" The word was a rasp, like a rusted hinge. Everyone froze. Julian's hand fell from Elena's arm. Isabella Thorne was standing. She had walked to the stage. She had taken the live microphone from the podium. "Stop!" she said again, her voice hoarse from a decade of disuse. "Mother," Julian whispered, his face white with panic. "Mother, go sit down. You're confused." "I am not," Isabella said, her voice growing stronger. "Confused." She turned to the crowd, to the image of her own terrified face. "My husband, Arthur Thorne, was a thief and a murderer." "Mother, no!" "And I?" Her voice broke. "I was a coward. I sat in that car. I watched. I watched him order the death of that boy, Leo." She looked at Eleanor, tears streaming down her face. "Leo. His name was Leo." Then she turned back to her son. "And you, Julian, you knew. You used it. You used my shame. You used my silence." Isabella took a deep, ragged breath and delivered the final blow. "Arthur's heart attack," she said, her voice ringing through the hall. "It wasn't a heart attack. Was it, Julian? You found out what he did. You found out he was going to write you out of the will for being weak. You fixed his blood pressure medication. You killed your own father." The hall was in a tomb-like silence. "And Leo?" Elena stepped forward, her voice a whisper. "What?" Isabella looked at Elena, her eyes full of a strange, wild grief. Then she looked at the photo of Leo on the screen. "My son," she whispered, the words incomprehensible. "My first son. The one Arthur. He hated him. Because he was imperfect. He was deaf." Elena's knees buckled. I couldn't protect him," Isabella choked. "Arthur, he gave him away. He told me the baby died. He paid a doctor. He stole my son. I didn't know. For 16 years, I didn't know. Until that night. In the car. When they brought Arthur the bag. His wallet. And I saw the name. Leo. And I knew." Her voice rose to a final, agonized scream. He didn't just kill a witness. He killed my son." The room spun. Leo, her brother, was a Thorne. Julian's older brother. Julian's face was a mask of disbelief. "You're insane. This is a lie." The sound of police sirens grew louder. Marco, by the door, had made the call. Julian Thorne, the billionaire, looked from his mother to Elena to the police officers streaming into the hall. He didn't run. He just deflated. Elena could only stare at Isabella. He was my brother." Isabella Thorne dropped the microphone. She walked past her son, past the police, and straight to Elena. She raised her shaking hands. She signed the butterfly. "Leo." And then she collapsed. The aftermath was a meteor explosion. The Thorne empire collapsed. Julian was charged with his father's murder and a lifetime of fraud. David Fincher's name was cleared, while Chloe Van Doren cooperated and disappeared. But Elena was lost. The world had been rewritten. Paperwork soon proved what Isabella had screamed. Leo was her adopted brother, Isabella's firstborn son, discarded by Arthur Thorne as an imperfect heir. Eleanor offered millions in settlements from the estate, refused it all. She visited Isabella once at a quiet facility. Isabella was in a garden, watching butterflies. Eleanor sat and finally signed, "You knew who I was at the restaurant?" Isabella's hands replied, "No. I just saw a kind face. When I signed Leo, it was a prayer. He was a good person," Eleanor signed, her hands shaking. "Our brother." "I know," Isabella signed. "I watched him from afar. I failed to protect him. As Eleanor stood to leave, Isabella grabbed her hand. "The money. It is not yours. It is his. Take it. Use it. For him." And Eleanor did. She created the Butterfly Fund. With the full weight of the Thorn fortune she now controlled, she established the nation's largest non-profit for deaf and hard-of-hearing children. She bought L'Etoile d'Or and, with Marco, turned it into a free culinary training school. The final scene wasn't a courtroom. It was a bright classroom. Eleanor, no longer a shadow, stood teaching a class of children, their hands moving like butterflies. In the back, Isabella Thorne sat, watching, her hands folded, finally at peace. Elena wasn't a waitress. She wasn't a billionaire. She was, simply, Leo's sister. And she had finally brought him home. In the end, it wasn't the billionaire's money or the waitress's poverty that mattered. It was the language that no one else was listening to. Elena and Isabella proved that true justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's signed in the quietest moments, just waiting for someone to watch. They didn't just expose a web of lies. They built a new legacy, one sign at a time, in the name of a boy who deserved so much more. What did you think of the final, shocking twist? If this story of hidden secrets and powerful justice moved you, please like this video. Share it with someone who loves a story where the underdog wins. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more incredible dramas just like this. We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below.